Gurnu pushes up. Bevan was there. Hathaway kicking now. Liner. Goes early to Tom Wright. Wright cuts crossfield. Wright dummies and goes straight through. I think he'll be quick enough to go all the way. Oh, Tom Wright! Yeah!
Oh, have you seen anything like that from Tom Wright?
25-16, the Wallabies victors once again. 2023 be gone. Welcome to this new dawn under Joe Schmidt. I'm joined now by Tony Harper. I'm Christy, Doran, and we're going to give this the Roar Rugby Podcast rapid fire edition to break down the Wallabies' first up victory in 2024 here at Allianz Stadium. Harps, it's late. It's 11:40. I'm here at the top of Allianz Stadium. There's only a few people left. There's some groundskeepers. There's lots of people picking up rubbish because there's 35,000 people here, and they walked away happy.
Yeah, but there was a bit of rubbish, wasn't there? I mean, that was a bit of a hot mess of a game, to be honest. And, I'm really interested because I'm not at Allianz Stadium tonight. I didn't make the journey up from my comfy place in Wollongong, and it all seemed very flat through the TV, although it looked like a massive crowd there, and they've got to be happy with the win. What actually was it like there? Was it embraced? I asked because at the end of the game, Nick McArdle talked to Tom Wright, and he said, there must be a bit of a sense of relief about that. And Tom seemed a bit taken aback by that. He was like, no, we're pumped. We're pumped. We've just won a test match. So there just seems to be, I guess, maybe a gap between expectation and reality. And it's great to have won, but what did you make of all of that?
Look, I completely agree. And Liam Wright in his post-match press conference sitting alongside Joe Schmidt, you could get the sense that Joe Schmidt wasn't particularly thrilled, but it was a step forward. But Liam Wright said, the crowd was excellent tonight, but I agree with you. It was pretty flat. And pre-game, I walked across diagonal to where the press box here, and my couple of older brothers were there, and they asked me what I thought the result would be. And I said, look, it could probably go either way. 5 points either side, I think, is probably a fair reflection of where this game is at the moment. He said, right, so we're going to lose. And I think there was that sense of anxiety in Sydney because Australia and the Wallabies have only won twice since wrapping up and sealing the Rugby Championship in 2015. Their only other victory in Sydney was against Samoa in 2019. The Australians are used to losing in Sydney, and the Wallabies, I think they are as well. And interestingly, Joe Schmidt said that he was a little bit disappointed with the last 10 minutes where he thought they were passive, conservative, and they let Wales kind of come at them and thought there's probably too much room that we've given them here, and that's an area that they'll look to expose later on. But let's talk about that Tom Wright incident because it was probably one of the few times that everyone stood up. The 35,000 people were here, got to stand up and celebrate a piece of individual brilliance from a guy that's just been recalled, having been burnt and dropped and brutally left out of last year's World Cup squad by Eddie Jones.
There's no doubt that was the moment of the match. I mean, there were a couple of other that ran it close. Noah getting punched in the head by the referee when he gave a penalty, and Wales copping a bit of friendly fire when they celebrated their non-try in the second half. It was like a bit of a comedy of error situation. There was a situation, I think it was the 44th minute, and Wales were pressing down the left, and Callaway and Wright got in each other's way, and the ball bounced this way and that, and it just looked like under sixes, to be honest. But that was one moment of sheer genius in a pretty dour old affair. The way he stepped, the way he ran, and much has been made about rugby union losing a couple of guys to the NRL in Carter and Marky Mark. There's a guy who's come the other way. He actually could be, we're clutching at straws. We want a real superstar to emerge this season, don't we? But he could play for the All Blacks, this guy. He's that hot at the moment. Australia seems miles off that place, but it was just, it was a thing of great beauty. And I don't say that often.
Yeah, he's one of the few players that you give him an inch and you'll back him to score. And I think if his first touch for the Wallabies against the All Blacks, where he scores, it was a nice chip kick, and then Jordan Bataille runs onto a left to right pass, ends up with Wright scoring first touch. And then even 2 years ago at the SCG against Eddie Jones's England, Tom Wright shows his footwork, his finishing ability, racing down the right hand touchline. I think it's the former leg spinner. What's the stand there on the Eastern stand at the SCG? Bill O'Reilly stand, and he just got everyone in Sydney to stand up. And unfortunately, they left the cricket ground that evening. A 2-1 series defeat for the Wallabies that night, but they left feeling empty. Here they left feeling happy. And Mark Nawanganiwasi last year had an intercept try, 90-metre effort. Tonight was 60 metres. But the big thing is that people will go, okay, we'll give the Wallabies a chance now, another chance. And you're right, there weren't many other moments. Filippo Daunogunu managed to slide his way to the try line about 20 minutes earlier to finish well. It was a greasy evening, and that may explain some of the tactical kicking. Jake Gordon, I think, was very good in that department from his box kicking. But there were, I think, 27 turnovers. There was 24 penalties. 13 of those were from the Wallabies. It was a game that was hard to pump up, and the DJ that was sitting in front of me was driving me insane because he was playing a song every 30 seconds, and I thought I was at a Big Bash game, which annoyed me. And I know Sam Bruce, who was sitting next to me, and a couple of the Daily Telegraph journos behind me, but it was one of those games I had to really try to pump up to get to that level until Tom Wright sealed the deal.
They seem to play very narrow, and I don't know if that was in fact the case, but it seemed like kicking off Noah. They weren't really involving those wide guys until that, which is why it kind of stood out as a huge moment in that sense as well. Quite cheeky of Tom Liner afterwards to talk up his try assist as well. He's a bit of a dry guy. He's a bit of a dry guy, but he came on obviously and replaced Noah, who had one of those rocks and diamonds performances, mostly rocks. Unfortunately, are going to stand out. There were some moments, which we'll go into, I guess, as we go through the game.
Well, we're here now. Let's talk about that. The good moment being the bad moment first up is he misses a penalty from close range, doesn't he? And it's a straightforward kick. He's been picked somewhat because he's 86% goal kicking rate throughout Super Rugby and this year, and then he misses one from straight in front and thinking, oh dear. But he follows it up with a lovely chip kick where Lukan Salakaia-Loto plucks out of the air, quite heavy, probably like Buddy Franklin there, and he manages to get the ball, but then seconds later drops it cold, and you think, oh dear, that's it's making it hard to get on board. Noah Wasiliev, who's played 17 matches and he's been up and down, but you do have to remember first game back after an 18-month absence. So, look,
you've got to think that there's a lot of confidence needs to be rebuilt in these guys, right? After the way they've been kind of put through the ringer over the last year or so. New combinations as well, 7 debutants, new coach. It can't be easy, but if fans are wanting someone to come in, such a crucial position, of course, if fans are wanting someone to come through and seize that number 10, I'm the alpha, I'm the man, it really wasn't that performance, was it?
There's a rewiring that almost needs to take place, isn't there? And it seems like we've been talking about it for so long. I remember Michael Checker back in, I think it was in 2017, spoke about the mental and the psychological blows that they were suffering because no Aussie side was beating a Kiwi team in Super Rugby. And it seems like we're still talking about the fact that there's this mental fragility about the side, but they will get some confidence. And I know Liam Wright spoke about this off the back of winning. I asked Joe Schmidt around how important it was for the psychology of the team. And he said, look, it's always good to win, but we've got a long way to go. And he wasn't particularly glowing with his praise of the performance, but was very happy. obviously by the fact that they come away alive. And there was a couple of good moments in his presser tonight where he was asked, "You happy you're back in the head coach's box?" Because it's the first time since he was head coach of Ireland in the 2019 quarterfinal defeat, and he said, "No, not really. Like it's a stressful kind of exercise." And he's a very honest bloke, is Joe Schmidt. He's not prepared. He's not afraid to say that he's going into this role really fresh with not knowing a lot of these guys, and it's going to take a while. And we did see that. We saw some of the best of what Taniela Tupou can do as well, Harps. He scores a try, drives through a scrum, plays forward.
That was another massive moment, wasn't it, when he just exploded that Welsh scrum and, here I am. I'm back. I'm Taniela. I'm massive. Look at the calves on me, and he just went straight through them. Can he stay fit through this season? Where does he take us, if he can? I do think, just going back to the 10s for a second there, I just think there's so much scrutiny on them and it's so difficult. How are they, who can step forward and come and make their mark on this? Like we looked at earlier in the match and we go to that moment that you guys asked him about as well, the kick for Andrew Kellaway. And in the earlier game where the All Blacks got over the line only just against England, 16-15, there was a try set up by Damien McKenzie where he did something similar. He looked up. England had a blitz defence on. They were all in nice and tight and narrow. He looked up, quick chip over the top to Sevu Reece over for a try. And, if you compare them, and I know that you looked at D-Mac's performance today and you weren't that impressed that Planet Rugby made him their man of the match. So to me, it just shows that every move, every kind of moment a number 10 plays is so rigorously scrutinised. And that one where he kicks it and it's just ahead of Kellaway, it could have been a moment that really shot him, shot his career forward. But instead, it's another one where he's just come up short, hasn't he?
Well, I think you've written a story around Nola Losio and it was described in commentary for Stan around it was a low percentage play, and it was. He had the option. He had two Wallabies on his outside. There would have been a simple overlap if he puts it through the hands, and that's probably just the decision making that Nola Losio's got to get right more than he gets wrong. And yes, it would have looked spectacular, and we would have all been applauding what a brilliant piece of skill, but it was a low percentage play, and that was the key kind of word that was used there in the description of the commentary. So I think what you need, and similarly with Damien McKenzie, Hamish Bidwell's copped a bit of flack throughout the year on the Roar for being probably not a huge Damien McKenzie fan, but he likes him from a super perspective. But test matches are generally won by commanders. And you look at Andre Pollard throughout the World Cups of the last two editions, he's a commander there. He kicks his goals, he makes the right decisions. And you go through the history of World Cups and it's won by commanding 10s. And you just wonder whether or not Noah can get there. I think it's so early still in his career as a 24-year-old who's played 17, now 18 tests. He's probably won half of those to say that he's an international player or he isn't. But when you've got someone like a Tom Liner who's just sitting in the background, now probably going to be given an opportunity to grow as well, it's an opportunity to kind of allow I criticised David Rennie because he was the starting 10 or he was out of the 23. And I think the ability to be able to go between the two is a really helpful thing for both these young 10s, because they need a 10 who's got 14 matches of experience behind them going into a line series next year, not a 10 that's played 5 games, sat on the bench twice and been out of the 15 or the 23 for another 6 or 7 games. So it's a big position, and that's why we keep coming back to it and talking about it. And Wales tonight had another young 10 themselves, and they're going through some teething problems too. So it was never going to be a perfect game, was it, Harps?
No, and I think that kind of nails it, how hard this is. Like, Damien McKenzie played 47 test matches and is 29 years old. And as we all know, he's just basically coming in. Obviously he's got all that experience behind him, but he wasn't the first choice. And how do we get to that point? We've kind of jettisoned the older, more experienced guys. We're going to have to live through this. Like, it's fine for us to go, oh, no, I had a shocker, it's time for Tom. But Tom's younger and he's going to make a couple of mistakes, take the wrong option as well, put one out on the full, and everyone's going to go, well, who's next? Call up the next bloke. Is it Tane from, club footy in New Zealand? Does he come in and we do the same to him? I kind of feel like we're stuck now. This not going to get better in a hurry, is it?
Oh, no, I agree. And this was the disappointing thing with Carter Gordon, his defection to the NRL, was the fact that there was investment last year. Whether or not you agreed with it or not by Eddie Jones to take him, he went to a World Cup. He started in half a dozen games. And the fact that someone like Wasiliev didn't get that experience means that they need they're back to square one and where they were a year and a half ago. So, there will be teething issues. The good thing is no real injuries coming out of tonight's win. You see 7 debutants, which is the most since 1980, 44 years. It's a huge number. Billy Pollard plays his second match, experiences what it's like to win coming off the bench. Matt Fesler's only played now half a dozen tests himself. That's such a young group that's coming through. Lukan Salakai-Loto, his first test in a couple of years.
I thought he was very good. What was your impression of Lukan tonight?
I think his hands are still an issue, and they were right the way through Super Rugby. But what he's got is some meat on the bones. He's 130 kilos. He can whack guys when he wants. He probably runs too high into contact, but you need someone who's a big guy. I think the back row, Liam Wright, had a couple of good touches. Rob Valentini once again showed his physicality. Probably wasn't a night for Fraser McWright to show much because Wales had such little possession and rarely were pressing or made a break, and you have that open side flanker that manages to come back and get on the ball. It wasn't that sort of night. So I think there was probably a step forward, but more than anything, to come away with the win tonight is just what the nation needed off the back of a 40 points to 6 bloodbath in Leon, which you and I were there last year. And to think that 9 months later you're beating Wales and you're beating them by 9 points, you're pretty happy with that.
Yeah, but it reminds me of when France came down here a few years back, and it was a pretty average French team, and we got over the line in a couple of those and won the series. And it doesn't show that Australia is in great health when they get over the line against a team that's fairly poor. And I think that's the issue. But you're right. You take a win, you move on. I'm being too negative, absolutely. And on that point, what thrilled you tonight? What were you excited about beyond Tom Wright? Who kind of stood up? Anyone kind of impressed you that you maybe thought?
Well, I think we learned, and we didn't learn this actually, but what we knew was that Andrew Kellaway and Tom Wright were going to be good in the outside backs, and they were absolutely that. But I think the person that probably stocks went up, where you put a tick alongside his name, is Jake Gordon, a guy that divides people. His service was good, but more than anything, what stood out was his box kicking. Such a big part of the game. I know a lot of a short kicking game at times was effective with one or two of those chips behind. We'll probably see a little bit more of that. But I think Jeremy Williams stood up at times. Taniela Tupou showed what he can do. Isaac Kalia is probably the other guy. I would say that the two, Jake Gordon, Isaac Kalia, that loose head, young guy is going to be, he's just thicker. He looks like he's already physically more further developed than a few of the other props that have come through that look a bit fragile. This guy just looks hardened, and for a young man to be coming in and feeling the shoes of James Slipper really well in the second half. That's a really encouraging thing because you've got to have props up front. So that's to me, Kalia and Gordon. Who are the two or one or two names that really stood out for you?
Yeah, I'd say, as I mentioned before, I really was impressed by Lucan tonight. I know you're right; he did drop at least one going through there. Taniela again impressed me. I'd be interested to know, like Joe's talked about mixing these players up over the first test this season. It seems like it's going to be a bit of a development season, so I'd be really keen to kind of see whether he does mix up his 10s, especially next week, but who else he rolls through. It wasn't a massive night for overachievement in mine. It was a night of getting through, getting the job done, getting Joe off and running. My probably player of the match was probably Laurie Fisher for his halftime interview. He was as abrupt and as fun and as interesting as usual. So apart from that, who knows? Jeremy Williams, he was quite cute with his mum as well, and his extended family after the game. It was one of those nights. It was more like I don't know. If I was giving it a mark out of 10, it'd probably be a 3, right?
Look, I can't disagree with you. And maybe it's, I think we always compare it to what we've seen beforehand. Generally, there's a 5 o'clock kickoff game across the ditch and you're always blown away. And then the main course comes and you're always left disappointed and you're thinking, far out, I wish I just had stuck with the entree. But I think if I'm Joe Schmidt, I'm looking to keep the same 15. I'm not wanting to change things. There might be the tiny bit of tinkering where one or two of those guys that came off the bench, maybe you start them. But why do you need to change the 23? That's the question I'd be asking. You're looking for continuity and cohesion for a side that's had all sorts of disruption over the last 2 years, and trying to simplify some of those and just improve and get better would be what I'd be after. So I can't imagine they're going to be too many changes next week. Nice to see Charlie Cale come on as well. He's got such a bright future. And so athletic, so explosive. We'll see more.
He had a couple of good runs when he came on too, didn't he? He made an immediate impact in that sense. So I'd like to see maybe a bit more time from him. The other good news, Christy, is that we've raced up the world rankings. We are now ranked 8th. We were 9th before tonight. Wales has dropped to 11th. So happy days. That's the right direction, my friend. Rejoice.
Well, I can tell you that that's a lot better because Australia would have obviously dropped to 11th. They would have been falling behind Georgia or something or other if they lost tonight. So, look, the vacuum cleaner's starting on here. It's definitely a sign that we should be winding up now. But I think Australians will be resting pretty well tonight. They won't necessarily think the game's in amazing shape going forward, but they'll know that there was 35,500 people out here tonight. And the stadium looked a picture. When the Wallabies play the Welsh national anthem bellows out, it was a really lovely start to it. And there's enough to walk away and go, I'll come back to that, I think. So fingers crossed an improved performance in Melbourne next week. And off the back of a really troubling year for Melbourne rugby, Victorian rugby, hopefully it's a good crowd. It's about 30,000 down at AB Park. So do ensure you get there. I know I'll be there next week. Looking forward to that.
Thanks, man. Did you sing both anthems tonight? Did you get the phone out and get the text of the Welsh and belt it out?
I didn't. Thought about it. I just wanted to soak that one in. It was lovely.
Right. All right.
On that note,
can't wait to read your stuff.
It's just ticked past midnight here Sunday morning, and for all your latest news, of course, theroar.com.au. But until then, Matt Tamur joining at the start of your week. Thanks for your time. Cheers.